It's funny how a single moment can rearrange your entire life. For me, it wasn't some grand, dramatic event. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon, sitting across from a lawyer in a polished Manhattan office. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and fresh betrayal. My brother Ethan was beside me, his face a perfect mask of bewildered grief. He still believed we were in this together. Our parents were gone, taken in a car accident that felt as sudden and nonsensical as a thunderstorm on a clear day. For months, grief was a phantom, an ache I couldn't place. Then the will came, and with it, a number: $19 million. Our mother, a quiet architect with a knack for smart investments, had built a fortune we never knew existed. The will was simple, 50-50, divided between her 2 children, her legacy. But I saw more than a legacy. I saw an escape hatch. A ticket out of the endless cycle of rent, student loans, and a dead-end marketing job. While Ethan was consumed by sorrow, poring over old photo albums and mourning the life that had been, I was looking at the life that could be. He talked about using the money to start a nonprofit in our mom's name. Noble. Pathetic. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirl of figures and justifications. It was just money, I told myself. A cold asset. Ethan would be fine. He had his good heart, his steady job, his fiancée, Sarah. He was the kind of person who'd give a homeless man his last $10. He didn't need this. I did. I needed the freedom, the security, the validation I'd craved my whole life. The inheritance wasn't a shared inheritance. It was a lifeline, and it was mine. The plan was simple and, in my mind, flawless. My name was on the joint accounts. A few careful transactions, a few well-placed phone calls, and the money was gone. Transferred. Laundered. Untraceable. The lawyer, a man our parents had trusted for years, looked at me with a questioning glance, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. I just held his gaze, a practiced blank expression on my face, a stone in the stream of his professional scrutiny. He had no reason to believe I'd do something so monstrous, and I had a lie ready for anyone who dared to ask. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe to the channel to catch the next chapter. The first week with the money was a blur of calculated chaos. I moved it through a series of shell accounts, each transaction feeling less like theft and more like a game of high-stakes solitaire. I bought a small, sleek condo in a new building in Brooklyn, all glass and concrete, with a view of the city that felt like a promise. It was the opposite of the cramped, familiar house in the suburbs where Ethan and I grew up. Every new piece of furniture, every high-end appliance, felt like a justification. This wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was a blank slate. Ethan called me constantly. He was arranging the sale of our parents' house and dealing with the logistical nightmare of their estate. He mentioned the inheritance in passing, always with a tone of quiet anticipation. "I was thinking we could open an account together," he said one day, his voice hesitant. "Just to keep things organized. I've already spoken with the lawyer." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Oh yeah, I already did it." I lied, my voice a shaky whisper. "I moved everything. It just made more sense to have it separate for now. Less complicated." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I imagined his face, the slight furrow in his brow he got when he was confused. "You did what?" he finally asked, his voice low. "I transferred the money, Ethan. The full amount. To my account. It's safer that way," I said, the words feeling heavy and false on my tongue. "Our money," he corrected, his voice hardening. "It's our inheritance. 50-50, remember? It says so in the will." I took a deep breath, the lie I'd been rehearsing for weeks spilling out of me. "It's not 50-50, I said, my voice as calm and cool as I could make it. "Mom left me a letter, a private letter. The one with the will was just for show. I had no letter. No such thing existed. The words were a fabricated shield. She said the money was mine. A gift. She knew how much I've struggled, how much I needed a fresh start. I could practically hear him shaking his head on the other end of the line. The lie, once spoken, took on a life of its own. It became a wall between us, thick and impenetrable. Ethan called me a liar, a thief. He threatened to sue, to expose me. But the lawyer had no record of the transfer. The money was gone, and I had a fabricated story to explain its absence. He was a man of logic, a man who saw the world in black and white. My betrayal, in his mind, was a problem to be solved, a legal hurdle to overcome. I tried to act as if nothing was wrong. I started splurging, buying designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and a sleek sports car. The money, a cold, hard number on a bank statement, became a symbol of my new identity. I was no longer the struggling daughter. I was a woman of means, a person who had made something of herself. But the lavish lifestyle felt hollow. Every time I looked at a price tag, I saw Ethan's face. I saw the raw anger and hurt in his eyes. He stopped answering my calls. I'd try to reach him, to tell him I was sorry. But the words felt meaningless, like I was apologizing for a rainstorm after I had already flooded his home. I saw a picture of him and Sarah on social media, at a family gathering. He was smiling, but his eyes looked tired and old. A pang of guilt, sharp and cold, sliced through my practiced nonchalance. I had done this to him. I had stolen his legacy, his future, and the last shred of our shared past. The guilt was a weight I couldn't shake. It was in the silence of my new condo, in the too quiet hum of the city at night. I found myself driving by our old house, a knot of nostalgia and regret in my stomach. I saw a for sale sign in the yard, a new family's car in the driveway. It felt like another piece of our life together was slipping away, and I was the one who had pushed it off the cliff. I had the money, but I was poorer than I had ever been. The months turned into a year, then 2. The initial high of my new life had long since faded. The expensive clothes and jewelry sat untouched in my closet, a monument to a person I was pretending to be. My new friends were superficial, their loyalty as thin as the designer paper on a gift box. They saw me as a source of lavish dinners and spontaneous trips, never asking about my past, never seeing the shadow that followed me everywhere I went. I was a spectacle, not a person. I saw Ethan once, by chance, at a grocery store in our old neighborhood. He was pushing a cart, and I saw a young child with him. A little boy with his eyes and a mop of curly hair. My breath caught in my throat. He was a father. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying rush of regret. The money I had stolen, the money I had spent on a life I didn't even enjoy, could have given him and his family a real future. It could have been a college fund, a down payment on a house, a cushion of security for his new life. Instead, it was a hollow promise I had made to myself. I wanted to run, to hide, but my feet were frozen to the floor. Ethan saw me. His eyes, once so full of a shared history, were now cold and empty. He didn't say a word, just turned his cart and walked in the other direction. It was worse than an argument. It was a full stop, a complete erasure. I didn't exist to him anymore. I was a ghost, a bad memory. I was an empty space where a sister used to be. I went home and sat on my pristine couch, the city lights twinkling outside my window. I had everything I had ever wanted. A beautiful apartment, a life of luxury, and no one to share it with. I had stolen my brother's inheritance, and in doing so, I had stolen my own peace. The money had bought me a beautiful cage, and now I was trapped inside, alone. My life, once a meticulously constructed lie, was beginning to unravel. The luxurious facade I had built around myself was starting to crack under the weight of my own guilt. My friends were getting more demanding, their requests for money and favors becoming less subtle. I was a convenient ATM, a well they could draw from without consequence. I started to resent them, to see them for what they were, parasites. I also couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching me. The world felt smaller, more claustrophobic. I'd catch my reflection in a window and see a stranger looking back. A woman with tired eyes and a brittle smile. I started having nightmares. They were always the same. My parents were in the car, laughing, and I was in the back seat, watching them, unable to warn them. The car would swerve, and I would wake up in a cold sweat, the memory of the lie I told Ethan a phantom limb, an ache I couldn't ignore. The money, once a source of power, now felt like a chain. I had millions in the bank, but I was constantly calculating, constantly worrying about who knew what, about when the truth would finally surface. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The world I had built for myself was a house of cards, and I was terrified of the slightest gust of wind. One night, a friend I'd made, a woman named Chloe who was a bit older and more cynical than the rest of my superficial circle, asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "So, where did all the money really come from?" she said, her voice casual, but her eyes sharp and assessing. "You don't talk about your family, and you just appeared out of nowhere with a fortune." People talk. I froze. The lie was so rehearsed, so ingrained in my narrative, but in that moment, it felt like a cheap costume. I stumbled over my words, my heart pounding in my chest. "It was an inheritance," I said, my voice shaky. "From my mother, a private inheritance." Chloe just nodded, her face unreadable. "Right," she said, her voice a low hum. "Of course." I knew she didn't believe me. She was just the first person to call me out. The conversation with Chloe was a turning point. It was the first time someone had openly questioned the source of my wealth, and it sent a tremor of panic through my carefully constructed life. The world felt like it was closing in on me. I started to withdraw, making excuses to avoid my so-called friends, canceling plans and spending my days alone in my beautiful, lonely apartment. I found myself back at our old house, the one Ethan and I had sold. I sat in my car, parked across the street, watching the new family live their lives. A little girl, the same age as my brother's son, was playing in the yard. Her laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in years, felt like a physical blow. It was the sound of a life I had stolen from my brother, a sound I would never know for myself. The money I had, all the millions, couldn't buy me that. It couldn't buy me a family, a home, or a brother's love. I found Ethan's address online and drove to his house. It was a modest 2-story home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I saw him in the yard, playing catch with his son. He was laughing, a sound I hadn't heard in years. It was a real laugh, a genuine laugh, not the forced, brittle laugh I had learned to fake from my own friends. I saw the way he looked at his son, his face filled with a love so pure and unconditional it took my breath away. I sat there for hours, a lump in my throat. I wanted to go up to him, to tell him the truth, to beg for his forgiveness. But what was there to forgive? How could I ever make up for the years of pain and betrayal I had caused? I had taken everything from him. And for what? A life I hated. A life of loneliness and regret. I had the money, but I had lost my soul. I was a villain in my own story, and there was no happy ending in sight. The facade finally shattered in a public, humiliating way. A reporter, working on an expose about unexplained wealth among young people, got a tip about me. The story I had spun about a private inheritance was too thin, too unbelievable. They started digging, and they found the truth. The missing funds from my mother's estate, the shell companies, the false tax returns. They found the lie. The article hit like a bomb. The headline was a punch to the gut. Heiress steals brother's fortune, betrays family for lavish lifestyle. The story was a blow-by-blow account of my betrayal, and it was all true. My name, once a symbol of wealth and success, was now synonymous with greed and deceit. My so-called friends disappeared overnight. The phone stopped ringing. The invitations stopped coming. I was a pariah, a cautionary tale. I had always thought the money would buy me happiness, but it only bought me a front-row seat to my own downfall. The guilt I had suppressed for so long erupted, a tidal wave of regret that left me gasping for air. I was a thief, a liar, a terrible sister. I had destroyed my family. And for what? A hollow life, a life built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. I had a beautiful, empty apartment and millions in the bank, but I was the poorest person in the world. I sat in my living room, the city lights twinkling outside, and the phone in my hand, numb. I had nothing left to lose. I dialed Ethan's number. It rang, and I was about to hang up when he finally answered. His voice was cold and distant. "What do you want?" he asked. I had no idea what to say. I had a million things to say, but I couldn't find the words. The only thing I could say was a single, heartbreaking word. I'm sorry. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe to the channel to catch the next chapter. The word sorry hung in the air, a small, fragile thing between us. Ethan was silent for a long moment, and I could hear the faint sounds of his son in the background. My heart ached with a pain so sharp it felt physical. "Sorry doesn't bring back what you took from me," he finally said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It doesn't fix the years of pain you put me through. It doesn't give me back my sister." I wanted to explain, to tell him about the grief, the ambition, the feeling of being left behind. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't just a monster, that I was a broken person who had made a terrible mistake. But the words felt hollow. They were just more lies, more excuses. The truth was, I had a choice, and I had chosen greed. I had chosen to betray the one person who had always loved me unconditionally. I went to my bedroom and sat on the floor, the vastness of the room feeling like a prison. I had everything, but I had nothing. I had a beautiful bed I couldn't sleep in, a closet full of clothes I couldn't wear, a life I couldn't live. I finally understood the true cost of my greed. I hadn't just stolen money, I had stolen my brother's trust, my family's legacy, and my own chance at happiness. I picked up the phone again and called the lawyer who had handled my parents' will. I told him the truth, the whole sordid story. I told him how I had stolen the money, how I had lied to my brother, and how I wanted to make it right. He was silent for a moment, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice when he finally spoke. "You're telling me the letter was a lie?" he said. "You embezzled your brother's inheritance?" I just said yes, and a single tear rolled down my cheek. I had finally admitted the truth to the person who knew the whole story. The legal process was slow and painful. I had to sell the condo, the car, and all the designer clothes to pay for the legal fees and to start the process of returning the money. I was a pariah, my name on every gossip blog, a laughingstock in the world I had so desperately wanted to be a part of. The money, once a symbol of my success, was now a constant reminder of my failure. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. It was a world away from the lavish condo I had sold. And yet, for the first time in years, it felt like home. It was simple, and it was honest. I had no one to impress, no one to lie to. I was finally free. I got a job as a marketing assistant, back in the world I had so desperately tried to escape. The work was honest, the pay was modest, and the people I worked with were real. They didn't know who I was or what I had done. I was just a woman trying to make a living. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I saw Ethan once more, at a park. His son was running around, his laugh echoing in the air. I had called him a few days before to tell him about the money being returned. He had said nothing, just listened. He had no words for me, and I had no words for him. We had become strangers, separated by a chasm of my own making. He was the one who had lost everything, but he was the one who had found happiness. I was the one who had taken everything, but I was the one who had lost everything. My life, once a story of success and ambition, had become a cautionary tale. I had lost everything: my brother, my family, my reputation, my money. But I had gained something invaluable: my freedom. I was no longer a slave to my own greed, no longer a prisoner of my own lies. I had a chance to start over, to build a life on a foundation of honesty and humility. The money, once a source of my happiness, was a constant reminder of the person I never wanted to be again. It was a constant reminder of the brother I had lost, the family I had destroyed. I had to learn the hard way that money couldn't buy happiness. It couldn't buy love. It couldn't buy a family. It was just a tool, and in my hands, it had been a weapon. I often think about Ethan, about the life he's living now. I see pictures of him and his family on social media, and I feel a pang of longing. I still hope that one day he will forgive me. But I know that forgiveness is something I have to earn, not something I can demand. It is something I will have to work for, one honest day at a time, for the rest of my life. I may be poorer than I was before, but I am richer in ways that matter. I have my life, my health, and a chance to make a new start. The money, once the source of my ambition, is now a reminder of my failure. But the story, the one I've been telling you all along, is a story of redemption. It's a story about a woman who made a terrible mistake and found her way back to the light. It's a story of a woman who learned the hard way that the greatest inheritance of all is a life of honesty, integrity, and love. I had to lose everything to finally understand what it meant to have it all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more content like this.